So with that, I kind of want to do a heat check with you and give me kind of the Jakob, confidence index. You can do whatever you want. You can turn it into your own like rating system. You can do 1 to 10. You can make this rapid fire, add any commentary. You have touched on a couple of these guys, but I want to talk to you. So these people, the gamers that have these types of players, I want to know if they're really feeling any sweat or not. We're skipping JT. You already touched on
JT's fine.
And CMC you already touched upon. So let's immediately start with the guy that was the RB3 in ADP, and that is Austin Ekeler.
Well, I kind of started with this vehicular analogy where I talked about Henry as like a sinking ship. So I'm going to do each of these heat checks in terms of some sort of motorized transportation device. That's what I'm coming up with on the fly here.
I like it.
So I think Austin Ekeler is like a plane that's running a little bit low on gas, right? So it's probably still going to get to your destination, but like you might face a little bit of turbulence and there's some increased risk. Like I think Eckler is fine in the sense that he's going to have a good fantasy season. Like I don't think that there's a risk of like massive bust with Austin Ekeler because he's still a good player. His value add has always been less dependent on his like rushing ability anyways. And we see the potential like we saw last week where like it was full blown panic on Eckler at halftime. I think he finishes the RB4 on the week or the RB5 on the week because he like got all of these garbage time dump offs on the last couple drives. And he'll always have that, as an out because of the type of profile he is. But I don't think that you actually have enough fuel in the plane to get you where you were hoping to go when you drafted him in the first round because he's losing goal line touches to Sony Michel. I thought it was a warning sign in week 1 when it was the 3rd and 1 for the game, basically, against the Las Vegas Raiders. And they went with Sony on that carry who converted it. I mean, he had one of the worst goal line attempts I've ever seen in my life in the Chiefs game. Like he ran, it was like, I don't even know what he was doing. He ran so upright like that he basically had a straight line to the goal line and just got stood up at like the half-inch line and then immediately folded backwards because he like just was like running entirely upright. It was atrocious. But if that's what they're going to continue to do, that's a problem. And he hasn't even been running like a ton of routes. Like his routes in week 1 were really low. They're down below 50%. I know they got up in week 2. I think that was really inflated. Like he ran all these routes in the garbage time drives at the end, or I guess not garbage time, but like catch up mode, quasi garbage time at the end. If Kansas City like ran out the clock and got another first down, then his route participation looks way worse overall in the game. So I do think that it's alarm bells for Eckler. I think he looks more like maybe more like people thought Javonte Williams would be kind of early in the season, like a 2-3 turn type of running back to me, where like he's going to be fine, but I don't think there's enough fuel in the plane.
Yeah, you're really just kind of, banking on that offensive attachment too to kind of float him there. I don't think he'll get pulled off every goal line carry, but it's definitely been troubling so far. I mean, he looks like a very expensive version of Devin Singletary right now in almost a sense. Like he's getting more passing game work, but it's very kind of sketchy. And he was a guy that like is a profile that like always kind of scares me at the top because we've seen it again. Everyone does this for that like type of profile running back. We saw it happen with Chase Edmonds again already 2 weeks into the season because you just can't trust what coaching staffs are going to do with guys built like that. And there's really no data to support like those guys get hurt more or they're more inefficient with short yardage carries. But like coaches still are going to always kind of lean on either reducing those guys' touches or going with a 225-pound back, even if he sucks on 3rd and 1. Like it just always happens. Like these coaches always do it. And we're seeing that again. Like Eckler opened the season himself openly saying like, well, we're going to reduce my touches. Like, you never want to hear that. Like Christian McCaffrey's been like the one recent guy that's been able to get like through that, like since like Ray Rice days. And even now like is still like the last guy because, so we'll go to the second guy here. And that is a guy you already named. Let's do Derrick Henry.
Yeah. I mean, Derrick Henry is like a battleship, where the other person is looking at your board and you're playing the board game Battleship and they can see exactly where it is and they're just calling out your numbers and you're just waiting for it to sink. It looks bad. I mean, it's going to be better than it was. Like he'll have weeks for sure. But like, even if he has Dehember this year, I don't know that a lot of his managers will be alive in Dehember to be able to reap the rewards. I think the Titans, there's structural concerns with the Titans, right? Like I bet pretty heavily on their under. this year. They're not a good team. They lost players. Losing AJ Brown is massive for them. We saw what happened to their offense last year when they lost AJ Brown. They completely sputtered. And Derrick Henry then has to not just be a good running back, but like such an outlier good running back where he can lead a bad team to being a good team, right? Like most running backs, the running backs don't matter ethos essentially states like running backs are products of their environment, right? They're not the one who knocks. But Derrick Henry has been the one who knocks in Tennessee for a while, or at least plausibly it could be said that he is so. And if he's not consistently breaking off these massive runs that are turning the tide and are winning Tennessee games, like he has to be the product of his own positive game script in that regard, because there isn't enough going around him. And if he's also declining in skill, where he's always been a little bit of a feast or famine runner, but if he doesn't have that level of explosiveness anymore, where he's not feasting quite as frequently, then he can't create the environment in which he's going to be able to continue to get carries in the second half. So I'm worried about the Titans. For that reason, I'm very worried about Derrick Henry. If it keeps going as it's been going, then his profile all of a sudden looks like other 2-down grinders on bad teams, right? And it's like, that's like the Pierce, the Penny, it's just scary. At best, I guess you could say he's Nick Chubb, but Nick Chubb is like a hyper efficient elite rusher. Mm-hmm. Derrick Henry so far has not been. So very worried about Henry. He kind of looks like a sinking ship to me.
Yeah, and the offensive structure, like you said, I love how you phrased it that he's now in a spot where he has to create that game script for himself. So in situations where he doesn't, you're getting double whammied. He's not one. His inefficiency now is leading to his own demise, which is trouble. Nick Chubb is really not going to have that much problem with that because the offensive line is great, and then he's still having efficiency. It's when the actual quarterback play is bad. That's when he gets scripted out. But he's really not creating his own negative game script himself. Because Henry carries so much of this Tennessee offense and is still tasked to do so at this stage of where they are in the shuffle. Now they lose Taylor Lewan. We don't know exactly when he's going to be back. It is definitely looking pretty bleak. Someone else you brought up was Naji Harris, the guy who I was outright trying to get people to avoid, but he still was being drafted. And it turns out that he also still didn't fall far enough.
Yeah, I wish that I had less of certain guys like Eckler and Cook and Henry and whatever, but I kind of mix them into my portfolio on occasion, just to have some. I actually do have 0% Naji Harris on the 218 best ball teams. I did not select him a single time. And that feels tremendous. I think that Naji Harris is a pretty uninspired rusher. Some people have said it's not actually that he's bad, it's the O-line's bad. In the near term, that doesn't really make much of a difference, which one of those is correct, because either way, it's going to result in his inefficiency. And the Steelers, as bad as they were with Ben Roethlisberger, they were able to create high-value touches for running backs, just in the sense of them getting peppered with targets. And it felt like, they were almost at their best when they were in this trail script, and Ben Roethlisberger would kind of go with this no huddle offense. He'd be sort of dinking and dunking to everybody, and he'd be able to get their fantasy value juice enough. But some of Harris's best games were games that they lost, right? And then he's just kind of picking up these receptions in garbage time. Now it appears like they're going to play more of a slower game. Mitch Trubisky or Pickett, they're not going to be quite that sort of out of shotgun, dink dunk, fast paced kind of Steelers that they were near Ben Roethlisberger's demise. He's looking more and more kind of like David Montgomery of the last 2 years, right? Where it's the workload's really great, but you can't really trust him as more than an RB2 because in this horrible environment, there's going to be some weeks where he's going to find the end zone twice and catch 6 passes, and that's great and all. But yeah, I'm really out on Harris. If we were redrafting today, where would Harris be? I didn't use an analogy, but I think for Harris, I don't know, maybe he's This is Sully Sullenberger level concern for Najee Harris. We got to make an emergency landing.
All right. How about Dalvin Cook?
Dalvin Cook's, maybe a helicopter. It's we're taking the scenic route, right? We're not going to get there as fast as we hoped, but I think we're going to get there eventually. He's going to find the end zone. Is Dalvin cooked? Perhaps. But is that going to result in a drastic decrease in his fantasy outlook? Probably not drastic. I think I would feel pretty confident he's not going to have the type of legendary upside that we need in a round 1 pick. But I think he could have a totally fine enough year that if he stays healthy all year and starts scoring touchdowns again, then those teams will be totally live if they hit well in rounds 2 through 6.
All right. How about Alvin Kamara?
Yeah, it's not going well for Alvin. Weird player where I was like really out on Alvin because I thought his rushing ability atrophied massively last year. And then you also add in competition for targets. But then there was a suspension risk. And it's like, well, I can't not draft him at the end of the third. Like, so I have like a big bag of Kamara.
That's exactly
that I
where
really
I'm
wish
at.
I didn't have. So I didn't intend to have it. I wasn't drafting him, but his cost went back up. But I'm stuck with all this third round Kamara that I think he'll probably pay off. So how about this? I think Alvin Kamara is like you thought you were getting a deal because you were offered first class service for free. You got a free upgrade on your plane, right? You're like, oh, I'm drafting this guy in the third. He's not even going to be suspended. Then you're partying up in first class. But it turns out that there's like, 350-pound guy next to you is taking up your seat room. There's a crying baby in front of you, and you're just realizing you're not quite getting what you didn't pay for.
I like that. All right, we'll run through a couple more of these guys real quick too, so we can shift into a couple other things. But how about Javonte Williams right now?
Javonte, I feel like bullish about Javonte actually. So I don't know. Maybe this is maybe it's like one of those cheap airlines where you're getting a little bit of a discount at this point because I think you go trade for Javonte Williams, but you're still going to get there just fine. Your baggage is at no risk. I think you could probably trade for Javonte Williams. I mean, there's that viral clip of like him standing open in the end zone.
Yeah.
I totally didn't have him in a live DFS lineup last week. I wasn't tilted by that play at all. So I think Javonte is in a great spot to go out and buy right now. His usage has been really fine. I think sentiment is so down on the Broncos right now that I think people are ignoring that Javonte's usage in the passing game, especially if we carry over to week one, and just usage in general relative to Melvin Gordon is probably better than the market expected it to be. So I think if you believe that the Broncos can get back to what we hope they would be, or even 90% of what we hope they would be, then the Javonte portion of that equation is looking, I think, positively. So I feel pretty good about Javonte.
I had someone ask me about the Broncos this week because I was bullish on the Broncos in general this offseason, and it hasn't gotten off to a good start. So people wanted to recheck in with me. And I am still pretty positive. I mean, outside of a couple plays here or there, I mean, they're one of these teams. And I don't want to make excuses either, but 2 fumbles on the goal line. Cortland Sutton has a touchdown overturned. There's been a little bit of pressing. Obviously, the narrative is Nathaniel Hackett is a joke. And he may be, but this schedule is still too good. There's too much talent on this team. I would be really willing to still buy on the Broncos, especially after Sunday night, because if they don't play well against the 49ers, which I kind of, outside of Javonte Williams, aren't like super high on many of the Broncos players this Sunday, especially that Jerry Jeudy. No. Still rest of the way though. I think these guys are guys that I still want to come in and grab and still feel pretty positively about. So two of the running backs still to grab on that I want to hit you on. One positive, one negative start. Travis Etienne right now, 3rd round pick. How's that looking right now?
Oh, he's totally stone dead. I'm like annoyed by the Etienne rise because like I was all over him in round 5 and even round 6, really, really early in the offseason. And then I kind of got labeled as like the Etienne guy. I mean, I drafted him like 0 times in round 3. Like I thought that price was pretty egregious. I feel about Etienne probably similar to like AJ Dillon right now, maybe, where it's like he's a guy that I think is going to have worthwhile value in certain scripts. I like him this week actually a lot. I think he's a fun play this week because I think that the narrative is that his role got a lot worse week 1 to week 2. I think that his role was about the same. They just had game script that was really favorable to James Robinson in week 2. I like to think there's kind of 3 styles of usage split in backfields in general. One is sort of the situationally agnostic usage split. So think like last year, Javonte Melvin, where it's like we just kind of rotate drive by drive. They can each play in any given situation. We're not really subbing guys in and out depending on the play. Another is like the situation-based usage split. Like think Antonio Gibson, JD McKissic, right? It's like one guy plays all the early downs, one guy plays all the 3rd downs, one guy plays the goal line, one guy plays the 2-minute. And then the other is kind of the like scheme-based split where it's like one guy's going to come in for one type of play, the other guy plays other types of plays, and it sort of seems kind of random. But if you look at the play designs, it actually makes a little bit more sense. And I think that's kind of what Jacksonville's doing smartly. Right. Like I watched not much of the second half. I gave up. But for people who don't know, I'm a Colts fan. So, of course, I watched the early portion of that game. And I really was impressed with how Doug Peterson was handling the backs early. Like, there are runs that James Robinson is just clearly better at than Travis Etienne. Like, he's harder to bring down. He's a more decisive runner. He gets downhill faster. He executes the scheme inside. But, like, I thought James Robinson looked good on the touchdown run where he got to go downhill, foot in the ground. There was one run, I think 3 or 4 plays earlier on that drive where he kind of ran an outside sweep. I mean, he looked like he was running in mud to me on that play. So I think that the lateral quickness from Robinson is not there. I'm not sure that it's ever been there, but certainly not post Achilles. Etienne, I thought they've used him on some like outside sweep plays, on some creative passing plays. The one that Lawrence airmailed, and then the slot kind of slot go route that he got hit on against Washington were both like really fun, unique concepts that were clearly schemed for Etienne. So he's getting creative usage that I think is going to lead to high efficiency touches on early downs. And it seems that he's getting the type of usage that would pretend that he's going to be playing in passing situations. So I think they're going to get beat this week by the Chargers. And I expect that we're going to see a lot more of Etienne in the snap column. And I still think we're going to see a lot of high efficiency early down plays, even if he's only playing 30-35% of them.
Yeah, he's probably a guy that seems like he's going to be one of these, like, better in a best ball contingency value, like, will you ever get it right type guys, in redraft. But one last guy that people are definitely excited about the start, but I don't really know. I want to get your take on this. Is Clyde Edwards-Helaire? Obviously, people aren't worried, but how confident are you in him? So the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a weird spot where his usage would state that he's like a clear sell high in a vacuum in the sense he's getting outsnapped by Jerick McKinnon, but he's scoring all these points. But I think that people are so burned by CEH that no one's really buying high enough to make him a sell high, right? And the most important thing is that he looks good. Right. Like most of the issue for the offseason, was, okay, he's probably going to have at least a good role, maybe a great role, but he's kind of bad. And now it's like, okay, his role is okay. It's not great, but he looks really good. And I think that matters. Like Jerick McKinnon, I love Jerick McKinnon. Like I've truthered for him my entire life, but let's just be honest, right? Like he's sat games because his legs were dead 2 years ago. Right. So it's not shocking to imagine a world in which he gets injured or in which he starts to lose some level of snaps. He had an unimpressive goal line carry as well. So why can't Clyde get a little bit more carries? What if Jerick McKinnon gets hurt and then Clyde, like who's going to play the long down and distance snaps then? Not Isaiah Pacheco, probably. Certainly not Ronald Jones. So I think Clyde has every week RB2 value right now. I think it's possible his role grows without an injury. I think it's like really possible that he's like a full blown almost workhorse if Jerick McKinnon was to get hurt. So I'm probably sure if someone actually wants to buy him based on what he's produced, then I'd sell high, but I don't think anyone's doing that. So I'm probably more likely to buy or hold CEH.
Yeah, he's someone I've been a little more optimistic on just based on how the games have kind of played out. And just like you said, he's just looked the part. So if he's going to continue to look the part in an offense we know inherently is going to score a lot of points, like I don't really like to give those kind of running backs away because typically my RB2s are guys I'm going on a week-to-week basis with anyway. So I want to have as many of those players with the team attachment and talent attachment that he has. So he's been a guy I've been reluctant to just say like, oh, whoa, don't dump him. Like, yeah, so definitely pretty interesting. I love that because it's been a tough run out here for some of these early round running backs.